Hey everybody, discussion form 4, getting almost to the end of the year, talking about 1 Corinthians 8 through 10. The first question being, what didn't you understand or didn't make sense? So I'm pretty familiar with this passage, and I've done a lot of expository thoughts towards it. So I'm going to change the question a little bit and actually address what I wrestle with in this passage of scripture. Paul talks a lot about what is lawful, what is on your conscience, in sacrificing, eating meat sacrificed to idols, or eating and drinking. In another passage, he would go more thoroughly into, drinking wine and such like that. Given our history, my husband and I being pastors, we were a part of many different churches who had different policies for drinking, and whether, just wine or cocktails or whatever. And the majority of the reason for that was that in our non-denominational culture, a lot of the roots of the churches that we were a part of came out of the 60s and 70s when the Jesus movement, and there was a lot of people who had come off being drug addicts and alcoholics and that kind of thing. And so when Paul talked about the idea of does it benefit the other person? Like, does it cause something to stumble within them to see you doing something? A lot of policies, and at least in my church circles, came out of the idea that there was just so many people who had come out of those lifestyles that they felt it was good practice, at least for the pastors, to abstain so that, it didn't become an issue for new Christians or Christians developing in their faith. And that's totally fine with that. But I think after the generations after that, you don't see as much of that especially with young adults who, socially drink is part of the fabric, like tattoos are not an issue anymore. And so just in the last couple of years, since my husband and I haven't been full-time pastors, we enjoy going out for drinks. We enjoy, having a glass of wine with dinner. And it has become very much a social engagement with our friends and just things around us. So I think that the wrestlement with that was very real for us. And I think that it is one of the things that, just going into the next question about what was appealing about in the Christian culture here, one of my favorite scripture passages is in here, and I've used it a lot for a lot of things to grid my life through. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. Another passage says they're all helpful, but not everything is beneficial. And again, going back to that example, it wasn't beneficial. What was more important to me was people feeling like they were becoming healthy individuals, not me exercising my right, as Paul says, to have a glass of wine in public. I also used it a lot with my kids because what we called the disputable matters, where the Bible doesn't really address a lot of things like, should we be watching this movie? Can you go do this on the weekend? And that was kind of our grid. Like, well, all things are technically lawful, but is this really beneficial? And that was everyday language for us. And it really is a good, I think that it works pretty well. The last one is if anything was surprising. It was actually when I was reading it again, and I haven't read this passage in a while, but it says that, when I was talking about Moses in the wilderness, and it says that even though they saw all these miracles, nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. And I've always known the wilderness experience to be something where you're in a state of disbelief or unbelief in the things that you always have hold to be true. And I guess that kind of went back to, in my mind, what Lewis was talking about when he was just saying that faith was something that you've already reasoned out, but the mood and the season of life that you're in, you start questioning and doubting and stuff. If faith is keeping that solid in your life. And I felt like that's kind of what was being reiterated here, that you're overthrown in your own thoughts of what you always have held to, because you're in a wilderness and you're susceptible to starting to think about things that you maybe never questioned before. And not that all questioning is bad, but some of it can be pretty detrimental. So those are my answers this week. It's a great discussion, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think.